Corruption is a form of dishonesty or a criminal offense which is undertaken by a person or an organization which is entrusted in a position of authority, in order to acquire illicit benefits or abuse power for one's personal gain. According to a 2017 survey study, the following factors have been attributed as causes of corruption is greed of money, desires, higher levels of market and political monopolization, low levels of democracy, weak civil participation and low political transparency. The impacts of corruption disproportionately affect the most vulnerable people in society. Widespread corruption deters investment, weakens economic growth and undermines the rule of law. It hampers the growth of the nation and thus has an adverse impact on the growth of each individual in the country. Political corruption lies at the core of our country. Empirical studies have shown that the poor pay the highest percentage of their income in bribes. Some studies have suggested that the poor may even be preyed upon since they are seen as powerless to complain. Every stolen or misdirected money affects the poor for an equal opportunity in life and prevents governments from investing in their human capital. Corruption has a disproportionate impact on the poor and most vulnerable, increasing costs and reducing access to services, including health, education and justice. Corruption in the procurement of drugs and medical equipment drives up costs and can lead to substandard or harmful products. The human costs of counterfeit drugs and vaccinations on health outcomes and the lifelong impacts on children far exceed the financial costs. Unofficial payments for services can have a particularly pernicious effect on poor people. Corruption erodes trust in government and undermines the social contract. This is cause for concern across the globe, but particularly in contexts of fragility and violence, as corruption fuels and perpetuates the inequalities and discontent that lead to fragility, violent extremism, and conflict. Making inroads against corruption often requires determined efforts to overcome vested interests. Transparency and open governance are typically part of the story, but rarely the whole story. When popular disaffection with corruption and cronyism reaches a boiling point, the political rewards to addressing corruption can exceed the costs of upsetting interests. When approaching anti-corruption at the country level, it is important to put in place institutional systems and incentives to prevent corruption from occurring in the first place. Prevention also calls for credible deterrence, relying on accountability and enforcement mechanisms sufficiently strong to send a message to potential wrongdoers of the potential cost of their misconduct. At the same time, we must recognize that the local political and social context influences both the level of corruption and the reform approaches likely to meet with success or failure. Corruption is a global problem that requires global solutions. By addressing corruption through a human rights framework, the social impact of corruption is made visible. This generates awareness in society about the consequences of this scourge and creates new alliances in the fight against corruption. Thanks for watching. Do subscribe our channel Essay Practice for more essays. For more updates, click on bell icon.